Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're examining a compelling, if maybe unconventional, hypothesis. The idea that governments worldwide have intentionally concealed evidence supporting the notion that the Earth is actually flat. Now, this is a notion that's definitely gained some traction in certain circles, and our aim today really is to explore the core claims, the reasoning, put forth by its proponents.
Yeah, drawing from the discussions and arguments out there.
Exactly. So our mission is just to understand the fundamental tenets of this hypothesis and the nature of the arguments used to support it.
And it's probably crucial right at the start to acknowledge that the established scientific understanding, the one developed through centuries of observation experimentation, it unequivocally affirms the Earth is a sphere.
Right. That's the baseline scientific consensus.
But this contemporary resurgence of flat Earth beliefs and this accompanying idea of governmental concealment, well, it presents a really intriguing phenomenon. It makes you think about how certain viewpoints gain prominence and why this specific idea of a massive cover-up becomes so central to it.
Let's dive into that, the modern resurgence. Because we have seen, haven't we, a noticeable increase in interest around flat Earth beliefs, probably since around 2010.
Oh, absolutely.
You see the formation of societies, growing online communities, just generally a greater public visibility of these ideas.
Yeah.
So what factors do you think might account for this contemporary surge?
Well, what's particularly notable, I think, is how often this belief aligns with broader narratives of conspiracy. For many people who adhere to a flat Earth model today, the idea of a spherical Earth isn't just, a scientific mistake.
Yeah.
It's seen as a deliberate, meticulously orchestrated deception by powerful entities, governments, whoever.
Or a conscious effort to mislead.
Exactly. And that perspective, it kind of necessitates developing these quite intricate conspiracy theories aimed at explaining away the, frankly, substantial body of evidence that contradicts a flat Earth.
Things like satellite images, how planes fly.
Everything, yeah. Satellite imagery, the physics of gravity, the reality of air travel, photos from space, you name it. And you might find this thought-provoking. It isn't solely about the Earth's shape. The skepticism towards mainstream science that underpins this belief, it can often extend to questioning other widely accepted understandings, too.
That's a really interesting point. And something else I've noticed in discussions is this recurring theme of distrust. It's not just directed at, say, scientific institutions, but sometimes it seems to extend even to observations or claims made by fellow flat Earth proponents if they haven't personally verified them.
That internal skepticism, that's a really key aspect to consider, I think. Because, well, when established sources of information are just viewed with suspicion from the outset, the emphasis naturally shifts, doesn't it, towards personal verification.
Makes sense. You trust what you see yourself.
But the sheer scale of our planet, and the nature of astronomical phenomena, they present pretty considerable challenges to actually confirming the Earth's shape individually.
You can't exactly go up and look easily.
Precisely. And that inherent difficulty, it can contribute to disagreements and maybe even further layers of doubt, even within the community itself.
Of course, the idea of a flat Earth isn't new. It has historical roots, right?
Oh, definitely.
Many ancient cultures held cosmological views depicting a flat Earth. We see it in the ancient Near East.
And early Egyptian and Mesopotamian thought, too. The world was often portrayed as like a disk floating in an ocean.
Even Homer's accounts in ancient Greece, they describe a similar model, don't they?
They do. And if you consider the broader sweep of intellectual history, it becomes really clear that our understanding of the cosmos, it's really transformed significantly over time. These early flat Earth cosmologies, they're often grounded in, localized observations and mythological frameworks.
Like the ancient Israelites. They also conceived of a flat, disc-shaped Earth covered by a solid dome. The firmament, I think it was called.
That's right, the firmament. Envisioned as this solid, dome-like structure overhead with the stars and planets set within it.
And these views weren't just in the Mediterranean or Near East. Ancient Norse and Germanic cultures had their own versions, didn't they? A flat Earth circled by an ocean.
Yep, often with a world tree, like Yggdrasil or maybe a pillar at the center. And interestingly, they also had this belief in a giant serpent encircling the whole world. Jormungandr.
Wow. And in ancient China.
Ah, yes. In ancient China, the prevailing model for a very long time was a flat, square Earth beneath a round heaven.
Square, interesting.
And this belief system, it stuck around for a remarkably long time, actually right up until, European astronomy was introduced in the 17th century.
That's quite persistent.
It really is. The deep entrenchment of that flat Earth concept in Chinese cosmology is quite striking.
But then we see this major shift in ancient Greece.
Yes, a crucial turning point.
Philosophers like Pythagoras, Parmenides, they started proposing a spherical Earth quite early on, like the 6th century BC. And by the 4th century BC, Aristotle was apparently offering empirical evidence for it.
Yeah, observing the Earth's shadow on the moon during eclipses, how ships disappear hull first over the horizon. Things like that.
And then Eratosthenes famously calculated the Earth's circumference not long after, pretty accurately too.
Astonishingly accurately for the time. So this divergence in ancient models, it really raises a pertinent question, doesn't it? The Greek approach, especially among their philosophers and mathematicians, it really put a greater emphasis on systematic observation, logical reasoning, mathematical frameworks.
Different way of thinking about the world.
Exactly. And that intellectual orientation, well, it facilitated the development of a more sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics and, the Earth's place within that system.
Now, there's this common myth, isn't there? That everyone in medieval Europe believed the Earth was flat.
Yes, the Dark Ages flat Earth myth.
But historical analysis suggests that's, well, mostly a myth itself, something that gained traction later, maybe around the 17th century, often used in arguments against religious teachings, perhaps.
That's largely correct.
Okay.
It's an important point of historical accuracy. While, sure, some writers in the early medieval period might have had somewhat imprecise understandings of classical astronomy, the educated classes, generally speaking, accepted the Earth's sphericity. You look at figures like Isidore of Seville. Yes, he presented diverse viewpoints, including maybe a wheel-shaped Earth in some contexts, but he also discussed a spherical cosmos.
And what about things like the royal regalia? The orb?
Exactly. The symbolic use of the orb, representing the world, in royal ceremonies throughout the Middle Ages, that also suggests a broader understanding of a rounded Earth, even if, the cosmological understanding of the general populace is harder to pin down.
It's also worth noting the progression in the Islamic world, too.
Hmm.
Initially, there might have been some flat Earth views based on certain interpretations of religious texts.
Yes, in the early period.
But from the 9th century onward, many Islamic scholars, especially those influenced by Greek astronomy coming through translation, they adopted a spherical model.
It really demonstrates how knowledge and understanding can, propagate and evolve across different cultures, different historical periods, often driven by new information, new intellectual paradigms. The embrace of the spherical Earth model by a significant number of Muslim scholars back then really exemplifies this kind of intellectual dynamism.
Okay, so let's shift back to the contemporary landscape. It seems pretty evident that modern flat Earth beliefs often intersect with other conspiracy theories.
Oh, definitely. There's often a crossover.
Like, I've heard the notion that mountains are actually the fossilized remains of gigantic ancient trees that sometimes seems to pop up within a flat Earth framework.
Precisely. Once you adopt a worldview that fundamentally questions or distrusts mainstream scientific and institutional narratives, well, it can become easier to embrace other, let's say, unconventional explanations for natural phenomena.
Like a cascade effect.
Kind of. These interconnected belief systems can sort of reinforce one another, creating a self-contained system of thought. You might observe that rejecting one established truth can sometimes lead to a greater willingness to question many others.
We also see instances sometimes of people misinterpreting or perhaps misusing visual information to support flat Earth claims.
Yes, that happens.
For example, you might see images of rockets presented out of context, maybe suggesting that space travel itself is a fabrication.
That highlights how the belief system can lead to dismissing or maybe misrepresenting evidence that directly contradicts the core premise.
It seems like a selective interpretation.
Well, selective interpretation and the outright rejection of contrary evidence are pretty characteristic of deeply held belief systems, generally speaking. When the foundational premise is the Earth is flat and there's a global conspiracy hiding it, then any evidence supporting a spherical Earth or the reality of space travel, it's likely going to be viewed as either fabricated or just part of that overarching deception.
Which brings us to the role of online platforms.
Yes. Crucial in the modern context.
Social media, video sharing, sites. They've provided these really accessible avenues for these ideas to spread, haven't they? And for communities of like-minded people to form and connect.
Absolutely. And the algorithms that govern many of these platforms, they can sometimes inadvertently contribute to the formation of echo chambers, right?
Where you mostly see things you already agree with.
Exactly. Within those digital spaces, individuals are often primarily exposed to information that aligns with their existing beliefs, regardless of its factual basis. And that can amplify the spread of misinformation, making it challenging for people seeking, or even just encountering, evidence-based perspectives.
There have been claims linking flat Earth beliefs to other sort of unrelated conspiracy ideas too, spreading online, like theories about facial recognition databases being built using social media filters, attributed sometimes to figures associated with flat Earth beliefs.
Right. It shows how that underlying distrust can branch out into various areas, connecting dots that might seem disparate from an outside perspective.
And the concept even gets pulled into political misinformation sometimes, like unfounded claims about political figures believing the Earth is flat.
Yes, it can become a sort of shorthand or symbol within broader cultural or political arguments, sometimes used satirically, sometimes perhaps not.
There are also examples online of fabricated or misinterpreted visuals being used in these discussions, images supposedly showing sunsets from space that are debunked, or misleadingly shared photos of spacecraft docking. It just shows how visual evidence can be manipulated or misunderstood online.
The visual element is powerful and easily shared, making it a key component in how these ideas circulate and are debated online, often detached from original context or factual accuracy.
Okay, so if we try to infer the potential motivations behind this hypothetical governmental concealment, based on the patterns of belief and reasoning we've talked about, what might those underlying motivations be, according to the proponents?
Well, given that strong undercurrent of distrust towards established institutions and the propensity to embrace these broad conspiratorial explanations that seems inherent in the belief system, it seems reasonable to infer that those who propose a governmental cover-up might argue it's done primarily to maintain power and control.
Control over what, though?
Well, the narrative could be that the whole concept of a spherical Earth is a manufactured construct used to manipulate populations, maybe in relation to controlling resources or managing global navigation systems.
Or something even more fundamental.
Or perhaps even a more fundamental control over our very understanding of reality, our place in the cosmos. The skepticism towards mainstream science, which we see echoed in various contexts, not just flat Earth, that further supports the idea for believers that established scientific understanding simply isn't trustworthy.
And might, in fact, be part of a larger deception.
Precisely. That it's actively misleading people for some hidden agenda.
Okay, so let's try to summarize this exploration. We've looked at the hypothesis that governments are intentionally hiding evidence of a flat Earth. We touched on the historical side, flat Earth cosmologies in various ancient cultures, and how that contrasted with the later development and acceptance of the spherical model.
Right, the shift in thinking.
We've also discussed the modern resurgence, its links to broader conspiracy theories, how it's been perhaps amplified by online platforms.
Yes, the role of the internet is key there.
And we considered how this belief system can involve rejecting or reinterpreting evidence that contradicts it.
The handling of contrary evidence.
And the potential motivations attributed to this hypothetical cover-up, generally rooted in distrust of institutions and a desire for control.
And again, it's important just to reiterate that our aim here was really to understand the claims and their context within this specific belief system. We haven't been evaluating the scientific validity of the flat Earth model itself.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for our listeners to consider. Given the sheer, just monumental scale of the alleged governmental deception that would be required to conceal the true shape of the Earth,
it would have to be vast.
What might proponents of this view identify as the ultimate, the enduring motivation driving such a colossal global lie? And perhaps more critically, at what point, in their estimation, would such an extensive, pervasive conspiracy inevitably face exposure or unravel?
It's a fascinating question. It really digs into the core assumptions about power, about knowledge, and the perceived potential for large-scale deception that underpin, well, many conspiracy theory frameworks, really.
Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.